Holidays can be a tough time for those trying to manage addictions and others who may be lonely or have suffered loss of loved ones at this time. To talk more about all of this, Gary Dierenfeld is with us, social worker. You can find out more at yoursocialworker.com. That's yoursocialworker.com. He's here now. Gary, how are you today?
I've missed you, Scott.
How long has it been since we've had a chat?
It's maybe a month. It's actually been a long dry spell, and I'm going through Scott withdrawal.
So am I. So am I, Gary. It's simply like, I don't know what the heck I do for you, but, for me, this is like a counseling session once every couple of weeks. And now, since we haven't talked, I feel very stressed.
Well, here we are, back again.
All right, a couple of things I want to talk to you about. I want to talk to you about how difficult the holidays can be in just a second. But there was another thing that came out in the last couple of days talking about how kids are in foster homes or group homes may be over-medicated or medicated. Lots of them are on prescription drugs. Here's the personal part. So my 7-year-old boy comes up to me yesterday, and he says to me, so I've got this friend at school, blah, 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 and we're chatting and stuff. And he said he has no parents, and his brother is dead too. So he was he's now in a foster home, or he's been adopted. So I guess he's been adopted. So anyway, he didn't get into too many details about it, but it sounds like something horrific happened. And, I wasn't sure what to say to my son. I said to him, well, you should feel good because he's obviously confided in you, but you should keep this private. You shouldn't tell any of the other kids about this because this is something personal to him. And other than that, I didn't know what to say to the guy. I mean, it just broke your heart to hear the story coming from my kid because even you can see the sympathy in my kid's eyes.
Yeah. So our children who do not have this in their repertoire of life experience, it is totally, I like this word coming up, discombobulating. They cannot relate to this. And, we as the parent, if our child is telling us something like that, we certainly listen to our kid empathically and then say, son or daughter, the experience you have with us at home, not everyone gets to enjoy this experience. And that's why we want to make sure that there's help available for everyone and that we always treat people kindly because we never know how their day has been.
Boy, ain't that the truth. They say kids are resilient, but man, I could not imagine being, going through this as a kid. And I remember being a kid and saying to my parents, what happens if something happens to you? Where do we go? What do we do? So, it certainly is something, and I can tell with what my kids are asking me, it's certainly on their minds. How can a kid get over this?
Right. And so let's take a look at that report that says, so many of these children who are in foster care are on medication. So they've all had maybe similar life experiences to the boy that talked to your son, or they come from abusive backgrounds where it's not safe for whatever reason for them to be in their own home. Maybe there's neglect, maybe there's parental alcohol or drug abuse. These are kids who themselves, as a result of what they've been exposed to, may not know how to cope, may not know how to get along with others, may be so distraught by the experiences they have and so overcome with worry for their family even though they're no longer with them. So how do we help these kids to cope? How do we manage? How do we help them get through the day? And so best case scenario is we actually develop relationships with them. So they experience us as caring, helpful, concerned adults in their lives. But along the way, they may need medication to help them cope in the moment, to manage behavior where their behavior may be so out of control that you can't even get to those underlying issues of hurt, loss, grief, what have you.
Right.
So these kids may be on medication, but hopefully at the same time, they're also exposed to caring parents in foster care and or caring therapists.
And I guess the fear is that it's medication instead of interaction.
That would be the fear. One is not a substitute for the other. You need to consider it more of a stopgap or a support. And I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing that so many of the kids in foster care are on medication. You really have to look at those issues or those kids on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah.
And say which medication for which kid under which circumstances and for how long.
Are we, this is easy to throw out there, and I'm not sure if that's the case at all, but are we over-medicating our kids generally? We hear that, kid's on Ritalin. He doesn't need Ritalin, he just needs some discipline.
Well,
I mean, is that valid, or is that just...
Let's take Ritalin. Let's take ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, for instance. The prevalence of that, the number of children that we typically see in the general population who legitimately have that disorder is in the nature, and I haven't looked at the stat for a while, but I think it's between 4 and 5%. So that's a large number. When we look at different jurisdictions throughout Canada and the U.S., and we say, what is the percentage of children on medication for ADHD? We get high percentages as high as 17% in some jurisdictions. And we say, well, wait a minute. If the prevalence is only 4 to 5%, why are 17% of children medicated? And so we also sit back and then say, well, what gives rise to the diagnosis? What's going on in those areas? We typically see more medication where the socioeconomic level is low, right? So poverty.
Yeah.
Kids may be through neglect or the parents unable to cope or offer the same degree of support to the kids, not because they're bad parents, but because they can't make two ends meet.
Yeah.
And so these kids may have their own issues concentrating, worrying, carrying on at school, which may appear like the symptoms of ADHD, but is not the neurological condition. So when we do prescribe, it should be on the basis of what we call a biopsychosocial assessment. So we're not just looking at the observable overt behavior of the child. We want to get underneath it and understand what's going on from a biological, a sociological, a family, and a psychological perspective to make the appropriate diagnosis.
All right, let's switch gears, talk about the holiday season. Obviously, it's a difficult time for people who have addictions or people who have suffered a loss recently. We've talked about this in the past. First of all, talk about how difficult it is, and then what can you do? How can we, lots of people have offering advice, but how do you get through this time?
No other time of year confronts people with the expectation of family getting together as Christmas time or Hanukkah time or Diwali time. Mm-hmm. These are family events where supposedly we get along, we're in good spirit, and we're happy. Not everyone comes from those families. You know that, I know that. And so the mismatch between the expectation and that reality creates distress. The greater the mismatch between the expectation and the reality, the greater the distress. How do we cope when we're under such distress? So those who have coped to drugs and alcohol or any other self-defeating coping mechanisms are apt to increase those self-defeating strategies. This is a very stressful time of year at the best of times. Mm. So we do want to make sure our social supports are in place. We do want to support our shelter system, giving people places to live and stay, be clean, obtain shoes, socks, clothing, bedding, to help them through this particularly more challenging time of year.
You talked about the stress of the season generally. in a sense, I think I'm like a lot of guys where, the whole giving, buying gifts and shopping and the extra workload that you have just coming up to the holiday. I just look forward. The best time is just hanging out and seeing family and friends and what have you. But a lot of the time you get caught up in that other stuff. I don't want to say lower our expectations, but should we not set the bar so high? Whether it is our feelings, whether it is functions, whether it's keeping on your diet. Should we just chill out for a while and enjoy it for what it's supposed to be?
What I would suggest to all of our listeners today who are feeling harried, stressed, overwhelmed, literally sit down, take a deep breath, and physically do this. Sit down, take a deep breath, exhale it slowly, and do that once or twice more. Compose yourself so that we can have that pause that refreshes, Scott. And in the epiphany that comes from that pause, in the aha moment, you sit back and you say, now that I've given a chink in the armor here, now that I've given myself this ever so brief moment's respite, then you ask yourself, how much of this is really necessary? And is there anything that I can do for myself literally right now that might help distress me? So we want, through this little exercise, people can, in a sense, center themselves and gain more control of their situation.
There's some out there that would say, Gary, that's poppycock. But listen, my wife and I, we're always talking about this.
Here, hang on, Scott. Hang on. For those who do think it's poppycock, you haven't tried it.
Bingo. You just took what I was probably going to take 5 minutes to say, and you said it in one word.
Before you dismiss it, just for the heck of it, because, you know what, I'm not coaching anyone to do anything harmful. There's nothing abusive.
Breathing is generally good for you.
That's right. So just for the heck of it, give it a try. It won't work for everyone, but even some of those who said poppycock, all of a sudden you're going to say, son of a gun.
Let me tell you a quick story. Many years ago, back in 1990, when I first came here and I was at Y95, we did a fundraiser for Ronald McDonald House where I was frozen in a block of ice for 48 hours. Oh. I'm not going to get into the promotion or the trickery of it all. But basically, I was confined in a 6 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot space for 48 hours. Very claustrophobic. So they gave me some breathing exercises. So if you became anxious or claustrophobic while you were sitting in a coffin for 2 days, you would be able to handle it. And I used that for years. But as time went by, like whenever I got in a stressful situation, I would do the breathing exercises. Yep. And as time went on, I did it less and fell off the horse and became a nervous wreck. And now all of a sudden, I'm looking for answers again. So I'm sitting and I'm chatting with my wife who's just taken up running. And she said, and we got a great doctor who's very, very strict and stern and just doesn't pull any punches, just hits you right between the eyes with it. And she said, you know what? When you get into moments like this, just take a deep breath. And then get outside, do something to change the environment. And for some reason, lately, with my wife and I talking about this, it has resonated, and an epiphany has happened. And I've actually found myself lying in bed with my mind going 5,000 miles an hour and said, breathe. That's the key word, breathe. And I would stop, and I would take a couple of deep breaths, and man, it is amazing what it will do for you. And it sounds so simple, almost so simple that it's silly.
Almost so simple that it's silly, yet it is that pause that refreshes. Scott, I want to talk about one last thing, if I may. Separated parents duking it out over their children at Christmas time. This is a big problem. It's something that tugs at my heartstrings. So many parents this season, they may even contemplate having to call the police to facilitate the exchange of the children between them on Christmas Day.
Yeah.
To those parents, quite frankly, better you miss your time with your child, then involve the police in the exchange of the child between you. Think of the memory you are creating in the mind of your child. That child come an adult. That memory will be etched in his head or her head indelibly. I can't say that word properly.
Yeah.
Versus you were the parent who didn't press, who didn't raise the stakes, who didn't fight on the basis of your right. That child's experience of Christmas will be attributable to you releasing the child from the conflict. So now imagine that child's memory of this Christmas and their feelings towards you in their adulthood.
Yeah, but boy oh boy, in the heat and the passion of it all, in the stress of it all, sometimes that just goes out the window, doesn't it?
Well, that's why I'm talking about it now.
Yeah.
In a sense, in the clear light of day, before we're in the moment, so that hopefully parents can keep their wits about them over the Christmas season. The last message, I don't know, how much time do we have?
We got a minute or so. Keep going.
Alcohol and drug use in the home over the Christmas season. Your family is going to be there. For goodness sakes, this isn't an opportunity to get blottoed and make a mess of it and also create embarrassing moments for your children. So if you are somebody who cares to imbibe, whose behavior might get a little out of control, either too festive or too persnickety, please keep your drinking in check. I'm not telling you not to drink, but consider the memories you're creating for those around you. Consider the feelings you're going to engender in others towards you that will last way beyond that moment of intoxication.
What do you say to those that need that extra blast just to get through this? Because you even saying that might create stress. Geez, now I can't even have a couple of drinks. How do you, what advice?
Beautiful. We talked about that pause that refreshes. Take that deep breath. Go out for a walk. I'm going to say this on your radio show. Masturbate.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's way more fun than breathing.
It's just that these are activities.
Wait till I tell my wife this.
These are activities that you can do on your own that actually relieve stress.
Is there not a book, Masturbation is a Form of Therapy? I'm just kidding.
I don't know the book, but I think...
Is that a little kept... Is that as big a kept secret as the breathing?
I think it's a bigger kept secret because whenever we talk of sexually related things, there tends to be some shyness, embarrassment, and social taboo with it.
Now, do you think you're going to get mail on this? You think people are going to say, but that opens up a whole other, you're just like you're using drugs or alcohol.
People are always welcome to email me. You got to know they already do with or without permission.
Oh, my. Well, no, never mind. Let's just move on. But you know what? Kudos to you for saying that because... I
want to be sincere, and I want to offer people things that typically, won't get them into trouble, that are not...
well, some may disagree with that one,
Well,
Gary.
listen, if you do it privately, I'm not coaching anything inappropriate. If you do these things privately, if you do them for yourself, these are activities... going out and jogging, speaking with a friend or clergy or neighbor about your stressors. These are reasonable strategies for dealing with stress. That's all I'm saying.
And I might add to all of that, it's free.
It is free, and so is the air you breathe so far. So you're taking a great big lungful.
Gary Dierenfeld is with us, social worker. You can read his parenting column in the Hamilton Spectator. You can find out more at yoursocialworker.com, yoursocialworker.com. Gary, another brilliant discussion. Hopefully we'll chat again between now and the holiday.
Take care of yourself, Scott.
You too. Thank you very much. It is 1:20.